London 1825 arrived beneath a sky the color of tarnished silver, and the city seemed to exhale a chill that slipped through every alleyway, every carriage seam, every guarded breath. In this sprawling capital of pride and pretense, where reputations were as fragile as frost on a windowpane, Duchess Winifred of Wexford stepped into the polished foyer of Lady Bexley's grand townhouse. Servants glided past with trays of steaming tea, guests murmured under shimmering chandeliers, and yet the moment Winifred entered, a subtle hush unfurled through the gathering like a ripple across still water. Though she moved with the composure expected of a duchess, there was a stiffness to Winifred's posture, as though every inch of her silk gown carried the echo of debts she had never incurred yet could not escape. The death of her husband had left her not only widowed but burdened with the financial wreckage he concealed behind elaborate charades. She felt the weight of invisible gazes settling upon her, each one measuring her worth by the fortune she no longer possessed, and the dignity she fought desperately to maintain. Lady Bexley greeted her with a smile sharpened by curiosity, her lace-cuffed hand hovering in a gesture that hinted at welcome yet brimmed with calculation. "My dear Duchess," she said, voice sweet but glinting with mischief, "how brave of you to come!" The nearby ladies, glittering in pastel gowns and armed with fans like delicate weapons, tilted closer, eager for the spectacle of a fallen noblewoman attempting to reclaim a foothold in their meticulously guarded world. Winifred curtsied with impeccable grace, though her pulse clattered like an anxious clock. A group of matrons seated near the hearth whispered loudly enough for the words to skate across the room. "I hear the estate was all but squandered," one murmured, not bothering to lower her voice. Another sighed theatrically. "Such a tragedy, to see a duchess reduced to appearances alone. One wonders how long she can keep the facade." The third, a woman with pearls as rigid as her posture, added, "Without wealth, even nobility becomes terribly thin." Their remarks floated through the air, landing like cold droplets against Winifred's spine, but she refused to flinch, holding her chin at a height that spoke of battles silently endured. As she crossed the room toward the refreshment table, a young woman accidentally brushed past her, spilling a ribbon of tea onto the hem of Winifred's gown. The apologies were rushed and embarrassed, yet the watchers seized the moment with relish, whispering about neglect and misfortune as though even fabric conspired to humiliate her. Winifred dabbed the stain with steady hands, refusing to grant them the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. She had survived debt collectors, nights without sleep, and letters filled with crushing revelations. A stain, however public, could not undo her resolve. And yet, despite her composed exterior, a quiet ache pulsed beneath her ribs. She remembered the promises her late husband had spoken in warm tones, the illusions of security he had wrapped around her like a velvet shawl. Those illusions had frayed quickly after his passing, revealing hollow accounts, unpaid debts, and the echoing truth that she had been cherished more for convenience than affection. She wondered if the room sensed that vulnerability, or if they merely delighted in imagining her collapse. Either possibility stung, though she mastered the pain with practiced elegance. She moved to a quieter corner, hoping for a brief reprieve, but the murmurs followed her like persistent shadows. A gentleman she recognized from past seasons approached with a courteous bow, yet his eyes flickered with pity rather than respect. He asked after her health, his tone politely distant, as though speaking to someone already half erased from society's ledger. Winifred answered graciously, but the exchange left her feeling more isolated than before, surrounded by refinement yet denied any true sense of belonging. She considered leaving early, but doing so would confirm their whispers, handing them the satisfaction of her retreat. Instead, she straightened her posture and forced herself back into the ebb and flow of conversation, determined to reclaim whatever dignity remained to her. Her resolve, however, was tested the moment a footman approached with a silver tray bearing an envelope stamped with an unfamiliar crest. It bore a hawk perched above a branch, an insignia she recognized only faintly, though it stirred something curious within her. The footman offered it with a bow, explaining that it had arrived only moments earlier. Winifred accepted it with steady hands, though anticipation thrummed beneath her calm. She slipped a finger beneath the seal, revealing precise handwriting that spoke of restraint and earnest purpose. The letter was from Lord Hawthorne, a widower of quiet reputation whose name had surfaced in recent gossip regarding a royal summons. Winifred had never spoken to him beyond fleeting introductions in seasons past, yet now he wrote with a request for a private meeting concerning a matter he deemed urgent and delicate. The words carried neither flattery nor pity, only a solemn sincerity that set him apart from the artifice surrounding her. She folded the letter carefully, aware that several guests watched her with thinly veiled intrigue. For the first time that afternoon, curiosity eclipsed humiliation, offering her a fragile thread of purpose amid the derision. She bid Lady Bexley a polite farewell, ignoring the quick glances exchanged behind her, and stepped into the crisp dusk beyond the townhouse doors. The air smelled of coal smoke and distant rain, yet it felt strangely bracing. As her carriage rolled away, Winifred read the letter once more, sensing that its contents might alter the direction of her fractured life. There was something deliberate in Lord Hawthorne's phrasing, something that hinted at both vulnerability and resolve. Whatever awaited her in the requested meeting, she knew it would demand courage she had not expected to use again. She closed her eyes briefly, holding the letter like a fragile promise she did not yet dare to name now. Lord Hawthorne's letter lingered in Winifred's thoughts long after her carriage wheels ceased their rhythm against the cobblestones. By morning, its words had settled into her mind with an unsettling mixture of apprehension and curiosity. She knew of him only through polite society's passing remarks, a gentleman of quiet integrity, recently widowed, devoted to a daughter whose well-being seemed to shape every decision he made. The notion that he sought a private conversation with her felt both unexpected and curiously significant, as though two distant currents of misfortune had finally converged. She dressed carefully, favoring dignity over ornament, and set out for his residence with a resolve steadier than she anticipated. Hawthorne Hall stood unlike the ostentatious estates of London, its facade graceful rather than grand, and marked by a solemn tranquillity that seemed to mirror its owner. A footman escorted her to a drawing-room warmed by a modest fire, where the quiet crackle of burning would soften the room's otherwise austere air. When Lord Hawthorne entered, he bowed with impeccable courtesy, though a faint tension tightened his shoulders. He was not handsome in the showy manner society celebrated, yet there was something deeply compelling in the steadiness of his eyes and the restrained kindness etched across his expression. "Your Grace," he began, his voice composed but edged with urgency, "I am indebted to you for coming on such short notice." Winifred inclined her head, studying him with careful reserve, sensing that whatever he wished to say bore weight beyond mere propriety. He gestured for her to sit, and after a moment's hesitation, he took the chair opposite her, folding his hands as though preparing a confession he had rehearsed too many times. Her pulse quickened despite her poise, for seldom did a man of honorable reputation summon a woman of uncertain standing without clear motive. He explained that he had recently received word from the palace that his presence was required at an upcoming gala, a grand event intended to celebrate charitable progress and royal alliances. Under ordinary circumstances, such a summons would have been an honor, but the Queen's advisers had made an expectation unmistakably clear. Widowers with young children were encouraged to present themselves with a spouse, lest questions arise about stability and suitability. Hawthorne paused, jaw tightening slightly, before admitting that failure to meet this expectation might jeopardize his guardianship of his only child. Though spoken calmly, the fear beneath his words resonated as sharply as any cry. Winifred listened without interruption, understanding with painful clarity the terror of losing one's place, one's honor, one's future. He continued, confessing that despite polite invitations from sympathetic families, he had no woman he trusted sufficiently to stand beside him in such a precarious moment. She recognized in his tone an honesty rarely found in their world. He sought not romance nor pretense of affection, but partnership forged through mutual need and respect. It was then that he lifted his gaze and delivered the question with quiet gravity, a question that seemed to hang suspended in the air like delicate frost. "Your Grace," he said softly, "would you consider acting as my wife, for one night only, to spare my daughter the agony of uncertainty and myself the threat of losing her?" The simplicity of his request belied its audacity. Winifred felt her breath falter, not from impropriety, but from the unexpected dignity with which he posed it. He offered no flattery, no manipulative charm. Instead, he offered a proposition rooted in shared solitude, two wounded individuals asking fate for a single fragile reprieve. She considered her answer carefully, weighing her battered reputation against the tremulous sincerity in his eyes. She spoke with measured composure, explaining that such a deception was not to be taken lightly. If exposed, it could invite scandal for them both, further tarnishing her name and placing him under harsher scrutiny. Yet as she articulated these risks, she noted a flicker of hope in his expression, softening the stern lines of his features. He assured her that he would shoulder any consequences, that he would never allow society to turn its ire upon her alone. The promise, spoken gently, felt genuine enough to thaw a corner of her long-frozen trust. When she asked why he had chosen her above all others, he hesitated before answering that she possessed a resilience few understood. He had observed her from afar during past seasons, admired how she navigated sorrow with quiet nobility, and believed that if anyone could withstand the merciless scrutiny of a royal gathering, it would be her. The compliment, understated yet sincere, struck deeper than lavish praise ever could. For a moment, Winifred felt seen not as a fallen duchess, but as a woman whose endurance held value. After a long silence, she agreed, reluctantly, yet firmly, to accompany him. Something steadied in Hawthorne's posture, a tension dissolving as though her acceptance had granted him breath he had been holding for weeks. In gratitude, he presented her with a small token, a brooch of understated elegance, adorned with a single amethyst stone. He explained that it had belonged to his late wife and offered it not as a sentimental gesture but as a symbol of trust, a mark of unity for the single night they must portray themselves as bound by marriage. Winifred hesitated, unsure whether wearing the brooch bordered on impropriety, yet the sincerity with which he extended it broke through her reservations. She accepted it with quiet humility, promising to honor the role she had agreed to play. But the moment of understanding proved fleeting, for as she prepared to leave, she noticed a flicker of movement through the window, a figure lingering near the gate, watching the steps with too much interest. She dismissed it as coincidence, though a faint shiver rippled down her spine, as though her instincts whispered of complications yet unseen. Upon stepping outside, she found Hawthorne's carriage waiting to escort her home. He apologized unnecessarily for the trouble, to which she responded that trouble had long ceased to frighten her. It was purposeless suffering she feared, and this arrangement did not feel purposeless. Their parting words carried a gravity that seemed to bind them more tightly than the deception they planned. As the carriage pulled away, she felt the weight of the brooch in her gloved hand, its cool surface pressing against her palm like a quiet reminder of the promise she now carried. By the time she reached her residence, dusk had gathered into a gentle veil across the city, softening the edges of rooftops and lanterns. She retreated to her room, fastening the brooch carefully to her gown's bodice, observing its reflection in the mirror. It shimmered faintly, neither extravagant nor plain, but dignified, much like the man who had entrusted it to her. She breathed deeply, acknowledging that the night ahead would test her resolve in ways she could not yet foresee. And yet, as uncertainty curled around her thoughts, a fragile spark of purpose glimmered through the doubt, urging her forward toward the role she had agreed to embrace. The gown arrived just after dawn, carried into Winifred's chamber with a reverence that startled even the seasoned maid who laid it across the bed. Its fabric shimmered like moonlit water, soft and ethereal, chosen with unmistakable intention. Winifred approached it slowly, fingertips grazing the delicate embroidery that traced along the bodice. It was elegant without ostentation, refined without coldness, and entirely unlike the lavish garments her late husband had once insisted she wear. This dress, she knew at once, was selected not to display her, but to honor her. That awareness sent a tremor of unexpected emotion through her, one she could neither ignore nor fully name. She lifted the amethyst brooch from her dressing table, fastening it just above her heart, its subtle weight reminding her of the strange alliance she had agreed to uphold. When Lord Hawthorne's carriage arrived, its lanterns glowing softly through the early evening haze, Winifred felt her pulse gather into a quick, steady rhythm. She stepped inside with composed grace, though her breath caught when she found him already seated, waiting. He rose instantly, offering a respectful bow that held no possessive presumption, only earnest gratitude. For a moment they simply regarded one another, as though both sensed the threshold they were crossing. Hawthorne cleared his throat gently, complimenting her appearance in measured tones that carried more sincerity than elegance. She replied with equal restraint, though warmth flickered between them, soft as candle flame against glass. The carriage lurched forward, carrying them toward a world where deception would be their shield. Their journey unfolded in near silence at first, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of hooves and the faint creak of polished wood. Yet the quiet between them was not awkward. Rather, it felt like a fragile space where neither wished to disturb the other's thoughts. Hawthorne eventually spoke, his voice low, confiding that he feared the evening might place undue strain upon her. Winifred assured him she had faced far harsher judgments and survived. She added that his daughter deserved stability, and if her presence could ease that path, she was willing to endure whatever scrutiny awaited. His expression softened, gratitude mingling with something more tender, unspoken but unmistakably present. As they approached Buckingham Palace, the grandeur of the sprawling facade loomed ahead, illuminated by dozens of lanterns that cast golden halos across the sweeping stone steps. The gathering crowd shimmered beneath the glow, their jewels sparkling like constellations trapped in silk. Hawthorne offered his arm, and she accepted it, aware of the eyes already turning toward them. Their entrance was met with a swell of hushed intrigue, for although both were familiar figures in society, their appearance together ignited questions only gossip would dare voice. They moved through the foyer with composed unity, exchanging greetings that felt brittle beneath the weight of concealed judgment. Yet beneath this brittle veneer, Winifred sensed Hawthorne's quiet protectiveness growing more apparent with each passing moment. Near the ballroom's edge, after enduring a string of courteous yet probing conversations, Winifred felt the strain of prolonged scrutiny press against her composure. Hawthorne noticed instantly, guiding her with discreet gentleness toward a balcony partially veiled by heavy drapery. Once outside, the cool evening air wrapped around them, carrying the distant hum of the city. Lanterns flickered along the balustrade, casting shifting patterns of gold and shadow across the marble floor. Winifred inhaled deeply, feeling the first true breath she had taken since their arrival. Hawthorne stood beside her in silence, allowing her the space to gather herself before speaking. He confessed that he had dreaded this night more than he dared admit, fearing he might fail his daughter or embarrass the only woman brave enough to stand beside him. Winifred listened, touched by the candor beneath his controlled exterior. She revealed pieces of her own burden, admitting how deeply the humiliation of the past year had wounded her, how every whisper, every pointed glance, had scraped away at her dignity until she felt nearly hollow. She confessed she had feared this evening would reopen those wounds, yet instead she found herself steadied by his presence. Their honesty drew them closer, weaving a fragile intimacy neither had intended. Hawthorne turned toward her, the lantern light carving gentle warmth across his features. He spoke quietly, admitting that her courage had given him strength he had not known he possessed. Winifred's breath faltered when he added that, had fate aligned differently, he might have wished to meet her under circumstances free of pretense. The words slipped between them like a whispered confession, full of restraint yet pulsing with an emotion both recognized but dared not name. Winifred felt her heart stir with a timid ache, surprised by how deeply his sincerity resonated within her. Before she could respond, footsteps approached from the far end of the balcony. A royal steward bowed respectfully, announcing that Her Majesty requested their presence. The interruption cut through the charged silence, yet neither moved at first. Their gazes held, suspended between what had been spoken and what remained unspoken. Hawthorne extended his hand, formal yet gentle, awaiting her acceptance. Winifred placed hers in his, steady despite the tremor she felt within. Together they stepped back into the palace's glittering corridors, the distant swell of music rising to greet them like an omen of all that awaited. As they navigated the passageway, Winifred sensed the subtle shift between them, as though the balcony's quiet confessions had rewoven the very fabric of their partnership. Hawthorne walked with renewed confidence, no longer merely seeking her support but offering his in equal measure. She did not know what the Queen would demand, nor how convincing their portrayal would need to be, yet a strange calm settled over her. The evening had begun as an act of necessity, shaped by fear and obligation. Somewhere along the way, however, the roles they played had intertwined with truths neither could deny. And though uncertainty stretched before them like an unlit corridor, she felt, for the first time in years, that she was not stepping into it alone. They entered the antechamber with measured steps, the silence pressing upon them like a solemn veil as the steward closed the doors behind them. A quartet of guards stood at attention near the columns, their presence a reminder that truth, deception, and duty all converged in this single room. Winifred steadied her breath, sensing Hawthorne's subtle tension beside her. He offered a faint, reassuring glance, a silent promise that whatever transpired, he would not allow her to endure the moment alone. The steward announced them with formal gravity, and moments later the great doors to the audience chamber eased open, revealing Queen Adelaide seated upon a modest throne framed by gentle candlelight. Her expression was not severe, but observant, as though she possessed an instinct for unearthing every truth hidden beneath a well-constructed facade. Winifred lowered into a perfect curtsy while Hawthorne bowed deeply. When they rose, the Queen regarded them with a thoughtful calm that seemed to pierce straight through the elegant attire and into the very marrow of their intentions. She commented first on their synchrony, noting how naturally their movements aligned. Hawthorne replied with humble composure, explaining that partnership, especially in times of hardship, cultivated a unity more profound than spectacle. Winifred felt her cheeks warm at the subtle sincerity woven into his words, and she added gently that shared burdens forged resilience when fortune had not been kind. The Queen listened without interruption, her gaze shifting between them with growing interest. The Queen then asked after Hawthorne's daughter, inquiring whether the child thrived despite the tumult that had followed her mother's passing. Hawthorne answered with unguarded devotion, describing the girl's gentle spirit and his determination to protect her from uncertainty. His voice softened in a manner that pulled at Winifred's heart, revealing a tenderness she had glimpsed only in fleeting moments. The Queen nodded approvingly, perhaps recognizing in him a father's earnestness more genuine than any polished testimony crafted for courtly favor. When the Queen inquired about their marriage, Winifred felt the air tighten, though she kept her expression composed. She spoke of companionship, of mutual respect born from understanding the scars life had etched upon them. Her tone held no extravagance, yet the honesty beneath it shimmered like a thread of silver. The Queen observed them in silence before remarking that unity between individuals tempered by hardship often proved stronger than alliances born of convenience. Her words, though mild, struck with quiet force, and Winifred sensed that their portrayal had touched something within the monarch's discerning judgment. After a moment's contemplation, the Queen granted Hawthorne full guardianship of his daughter without further stipulation, declaring that a child raised under such sincerity had little to fear. Gratitude flickered in Hawthorne's eyes, but Winifred saw something else there too, relief that went beyond the decree, as though her presence had eased an uncertainty he had carried like a hidden burden. The audience concluded with a gentle dismissal, and they exited the chamber with hearts unsteady from the weight of what had just passed. The palace corridors glowed with warm lamplight as they walked, Hawthorne offering his arm once more. Winifred accepted, though now the gesture felt less like pretense and more like an unspoken admission of connection. They passed through the great doors into the night air, where a delicate drizzle had begun, soft as breath upon cool glass. The palace lanterns shimmered through the rain, casting fractured reflections upon the marble steps. Winifred paused beneath the awning, watching droplets scatter across the stones, while Hawthorne stepped closer with a tenderness that surprised them both. He expressed his gratitude quietly, though the emotion in his voice carried more weight than any ceremonial thanks. She told him she had merely upheld her promise, yet even as she said it, the truth settled deeper. She had done far more than lend him her presence. She had offered him a piece of her heart's resilience. The rain intensified, creating a hushed symphony across the courtyard. Hawthorne stood a breath away, his eyes searching hers with vulnerable clarity. He confessed that he had feared asking anything more of her, yet the evening had shown him that some bonds, though born of necessity, grew into something honest enough to transcend their origins. Winifred felt the world narrow to the soft rhythm of rain and the warmth of his nearness. Hawthorne continued, admitting that while he had asked her to stand as his wife for a single night, he found himself wishing he could offer her something far more meaningful than a borrowed title. Her breath trembled, and for a moment she could not speak. The weight of her past, the ruin of her reputation, the shards of humiliation she had survived, they all stood like ghosts between them. Yet the sincerity in his gaze dissolved their edges, revealing a path she had not dared to imagine. She told him she feared binding herself to another promise only to discover it hollow. He assured her that nothing about his intentions bore hollowness. Whatever future they shaped together would rest on mutual truth, not illusion. His hand lifted toward hers, stopping just short, awaiting consent. Winifred placed her hand in his, her voice barely above a whisper as she admitted that the thought of a life not forged in loneliness frightened her as much as it comforted her. Hawthorne stepped closer, promising that no expectation would be placed upon her, only the opportunity to choose freely. The carriage awaited nearby, its lanterns casting soft halos into the rain. Hawthorne asked quietly whether she would allow him the honor of courting her properly, free from deception, free from obligation. Winifred felt her heart shift, steadying in a way she had not felt in years. She answered that she would welcome such a future, though it frightened her precisely because it meant so much. His expression, softened by relief and quiet joy, dispelled the last of her doubt. They moved toward the carriage, hands still joined, as though instinct had woven their paths into one thread. Winifred stepped inside, Hawthorne following with gentle care. As the door closed and the wheels began to turn, the palace receded into a blur of warm light and rain. She rested her hand upon the amethyst brooch, feeling its steady weight. The night had begun in uncertainty, built upon a fragile illusion, yet now it promised the possibility of something real, a future shaped not by burden or reputation, but by choice. And for the first time in a long while, she felt the quiet, steady warmth of hope settling within her, guiding her toward what awaited beyond the darkness of the passing streets.